throwaway account, because people from my hometown read everything and remember faces better than facts. I'm writing this here because therapy is expensive and because every time someone says, "Why didn't you just leave?" I feel my jaw tighten. This isn't a post about pity. It's about what happens when someone tries to humiliate you, assumes you'll stay small forever, and doesn't realize time and pressure can turn fear into something else entirely. For context, the man who raised me didn't drink in binges. He lived in alcohol. Our mornings didn't start with coffee. They started with the sharp, dry click of a bottle cap twisting open. That sound alone could tell me whether the day would be survivable or dangerous. Vodka wasn't just in his glass. It soaked into the walls, the curtains, our clothes, and eventually into the way my body reacted to raised voices. The bottle on the table wasn't an object. It was a presence. Sometimes it mattered more than we did. When he was drunk, he was loud. When he was almost sober, he was precise, and that was worse. He loved the word mine. The house was his. My mother was his. I was his too, the way furniture is owned, not protected. He'd lean close, invading space on purpose, his finger jabbing my chest or my face. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Dad, stop." "Shut up. You're nobody here. I feed you. I decide." Every sentence ended like a slammed door. My mother mastered the art of pretending. She stood at the sink longer than necessary, water running, plates clinking just loud enough to drown out his voice. Her hands shook anyway. When he snapped at her, "Be quiet when I'm talking," she nodded. Always nodded. At night, she cried silently, convinced I was asleep. I never was. The humiliation wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was casual. Comments in front of neighbors, jokes about how I'd never amount to anything, remarks about my body, my posture, my attitude. He trained me to shrink without ever touching me in front of witnesses. The worst part? He liked watching the effect. He'd smirk when I went quiet. He enjoyed knowing he could reduce a room just by entering it. The night he left, he was drunk and satisfied with himself. Slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Halfway down the stairs, he turned back and said it like a promise, not a threat. "I'll be back, and I'll take the house, so you don't get too comfortable." That sentence stayed with me longer than any bruise ever could. He didn't leave to disappear. He left to make sure we never relaxed. That was the environment I lived in before service. Constant tension, waiting, calculating moods, learning how to stay invisible. And when people later asked why I joined, why I ran away, why I chose something so extreme, I wanted to laugh. You don't run away from a burning house. You escape it. At the time, I didn't know yet how that escape would end, or how shocked he'd be when he finally saw what I became. Before service, the humiliation wasn't a single moment. It was a pattern, a slow, deliberate reshaping of how I saw myself, done so quietly that outsiders would have sworn nothing was wrong. It started when he realized I wasn't afraid the way I used to be. Not brave, not strong, just different. I stopped flinching as much. I stopped apologizing automatically. I answered in full sentences instead of nods. And that irritated him more than any argument ever could. He didn't hit me in front of people. He was smarter than that. What he did instead was perform. At family gatherings, he'd clap a heavy hand on my shoulder and laugh. "This one thinks she's special now." People chuckled politely. Someone asked what he meant. "Oh, nothing. Just attitude. You know how girls get when they think they deserve more." If I stayed quiet, he'd accuse me of sulking. If I spoke, he'd roll his eyes. "See? Always dramatic." Once, in front of neighbors, he said, "She won't last anywhere serious. Too soft. Too sensitive." Then he leaned closer to me and added quietly, "Smile, or they'll think I'm right to be ashamed." That word, ashamed, lodged itself deep. At home, the rules shifted without announcement. He'd move my things and deny it. Eat food I'd saved and accuse me of being careless. Go through my phone by accident. Every time I reacted, he'd smirk. Look at you. Always overreacting. The worst humiliation came the week before I left. I'd told him I was enlisting, not proudly, carefully. Like you tell someone you're leaving during a storm and hope they don't lock the door. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel, like glass breaking. You? He said. You won't last a day. They'll eat you alive. You cry when someone raises their voice. Then he turned to my mother. Did you hear that? She thinks she's a soldier now. My mother didn't laugh. She didn't defend me either. She just stared at the floor. That hurt more than his words. He spent the next days needling me on purpose. Better practice scrubbing floors. Hope you like being yelled at. Don't embarrass us. On the morning I left, he didn't say goodbye. He stood in the doorway, blocking the light, and said calmly, "You'll be back. Everyone comes back." That sentence followed me longer than he knew. Even after I left, the humiliation didn't stop. Calls where he'd ask if I'd quit yet. Messages to relatives implying I'd failed. Telling my mother I was probably cleaning toilets somewhere. I didn't answer. I didn't defend myself. Not because I couldn't, but because something in me had already shifted. For the first time, his voice wasn't the loudest one in my head. It was still there, sharp, familiar, but it no longer decided who I was. And I didn't know it yet. But the very things he used to humiliate me, the pressure, the isolation, the expectation that I'd break, were about to become the reason he wouldn't recognize me at all when I came back. The confrontation didn't happen the way people imagine it. No screaming match, no dramatic throwing of things, no sudden justice served in one clean moment. It happened quietly, and that's what terrified him. I came home on leave before my service officially ended. I didn't warn anyone, not him, not even my mother. I wanted to see the house the way it really was, not the version people clean up when they expect witnesses. The door opened the same way it always had. The hallway smelled the same. Alcohol, old paint, stagnant air. For a second, my body reacted on instinct, shoulders tense, breath shallow. Muscle memory doesn't disappear just because you've changed. He was in the living room, sitting, bottle on the table, daytime drinking, bold, careless. He looked up, squinted, and frowned like he was trying to place a face he half remembered from a dream. "What are you doing here?" he asked. No greeting, no surprise, just irritation. "I live here," I said. He laughed, that same short, dismissive sound. "Don't start. You ran off. This isn't your place anymore." I stood there, bag still on my shoulder, posture straight without forcing it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. That's when his expression shifted. He noticed the haircut first, then the way I stood, then the fact that I wasn't shrinking, wasn't apologizing, wasn't rushing to justify my presence. "What? You think you're tough now?" he sneered. "Uniform go to your head?" He stood up slowly, deliberately invading my space like he used to. This was his favorite move. Loom, pressure, watch people fold. "Let me tell you something," he said, leaning in. "Out there, you're nothing special. Here, you're still nobody." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I saw. "Move," I said. One word. Calm. Flat. He froze. "What did you say?" "I said move. You're in my way." His face went red. He puffed up, searching for the reaction he always got. Fear, tears, hesitation. When none came, he went for insults. "They broke you already? Brainwashed you. Think you can order me around now?" I didn't respond. I stepped to the side instead, placing my bag down slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. Every movement controlled, measured. That's when my mother appeared in the doorway. She looked between us, confused, alarmed. He turned to her instantly. "See this?" Comes back acting like she owns the place. I finally spoke again. I'm not acting. Silence dropped into the room like something heavy. He laughed again, but this time it sounded thin. Oh, listen to her. You think wearing a uniform makes you dangerous? No, I said. Living with you did. That's when he snapped. He raised his voice, stepped closer, tried to reassert control the only way he knew how. You think you scare me? You think you're better than me now? You're still the same scared little enough. Not shouted, not emotional, just final. My mother flinched at the tone. He did too. For the first time in my life, I saw confusion on his face. Not anger, not mockery, uncertainty. Because the old script wasn't working anymore. And he didn't know what to do without it. After that confrontation, nothing exploded the way I'd secretly expected. No slammed doors, no police, no dramatic ending where everything suddenly made sense. What followed was worse in a quieter way. That night, I lay in my old room staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Pipes knocking, the fridge humming, his footsteps pacing back and forth like a predator who'd lost the scent but refused to leave the territory. My body was exhausted, in a way training never touched. This wasn't muscle fatigue. This was memory fatigue. I realized something unsettling. I wasn't scared of him anymore, but my body hadn't caught up yet. My heart still spiked when I heard his voice. My jaw clenched when he laughed. My hands curled into fists without permission. Strength doesn't erase conditioning overnight. Anger came next, hot, sharp, almost intoxicating. Not the explosive kind, the focused kind, the kind that makes you replay moments you swallowed, insults you laughed off to survive, nights you stayed silent because it was safer. I thought about my mother at the sink, the plates trembling, the water running too long. How many times I told myself I'd protect her one day. Then came grief. And this part surprised me. I grieved the version of myself that never had a chance to be soft. The girl who learned to read moods instead of books, who learned silence before confidence, who learned endurance before joy. I grieved the fact that even now, after everything I'd survived, part of me still waited for permission to exist. Acceptance didn't come gently. It arrived in pieces. In moments where I realized he no longer had access to my inner reactions. He could still provoke my nervous system, sure, but he couldn't rewrite my reality anymore. The next morning, he tried again. Sarcasm over breakfast. A comment about my posture. A jab about how they'd probably throw me out soon enough. Old tactics, delivered lazily, like habits he hadn't bothered to update. And I felt nothing. Not numbness. Distance. Like watching a badly written character repeat lines that no longer applied to the plot. That was the moment it hit me. Humiliation only works when you still need the person humiliating you to see you a certain way. I didn't. Later that day, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Same face, same eyes, but something in them had shifted. They didn't search for approval. They didn't brace for impact. They assessed. I wasn't angry all the time. I wasn't calm all the time either. Healing wasn't linear, and anyone who says it is has never lived in a house where love and fear shared the same address. But I knew this. Whatever happened next wouldn't be accidental. I wasn't surviving on instinct anymore. I was choosing. And that scared him more than any argument ever could, even if he didn't understand why yet. The decision didn't arrive like a movie moment. No dramatic music. No single sentence echoing in my head. It showed up quietly, disguised as routine. 3 days after I came back, I noticed he was changing his behavior again. Not improving, adjusting. He stopped yelling as much, started watching me instead, tracking my movements, measuring reactions. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He felt the shift, even if he couldn't name it. He tested boundaries the way predators do, gently at first. Where are you going? What time will you be back? You don't need to act like you're on duty here. Each question wasn't curiosity. It was a probe. I answered calmly, briefly, without emotion. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I didn't give him leverage. And that unsettled him more than defiance ever had. The real breaking point came on the fourth night. He was drunk, not blackout, but confident enough to believe he still had authority. My mother was at the sink again. Same place, same posture. Some things refused to die on their own. He raised his voice at her, not screaming, just sharp enough to make her shoulders tighten. Something in me clicked. I stepped between them. No shouting, no dramatic gestures, just presence. Don't, I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You don't tell me what to do, he snapped automatically. I didn't move. I'm not asking, I replied. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. My mother froze. He laughed, but it came out wrong, brittle, forced. You think you're the boss now? You think that uniform makes you untouchable? No, I said. I think you're done. That was it. No insult, no threat, no raised voice, just certainty. He stepped forward, one step, then stopped. I watched the calculation flicker across his face. For the first time, he wasn't sure how this would end. He wasn't sure if intimidation still worked. He wasn't sure if crossing that line would cost him something he couldn't control. He backed off. Not dramatically, just enough to confirm what I already knew. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to save my mother by force. You can't drag someone out of a cage they still believe is home. But I wasn't going to stay and become collateral either. I started planning. Quietly. I gathered documents, recorded conversations where he threatened property, took photos, spoke to a legal aid officer through a military contact, learned exactly what his rights were, and more importantly, what they weren't. I told my mother my plan. Not everything. Just enough. I'm leaving, I said. But I'm not abandoning you, and he's not taking the house. She cried, not loudly, just tears sliding down her face as if her body didn't know how to do anything else. For the first time, she didn't tell me to stay quiet. When I finally left the house again, bag in hand, he didn't block the door. He stood in the hallway and said, "You'll regret this." I looked at him once. "No," I said. "You will." I walked out without running. And behind me, for the first time in my life, the door didn't slam. I didn't plan to come back the way I did. Originally, I thought distance would be enough. That leaving, setting boundaries, letting the legal process crawl forward at its slow, boring pace would drain him of interest. Men like him get tired when there's no immediate reaction to feed on. I underestimated one thing. Humiliation wounds people like him deeper than consequences ever do. 2 weeks after I left, my mother called me in the middle of the night. She didn't cry. That scared me more than tears would have. "He's saying the house is his now," she said quietly. "He says you're gone, that you abandoned us. He says he'll make it official." Official meant court. He filed while I was still technically on service rotation, convinced that a loan would keep me away. He told people I was probably overseas, probably busy playing soldier, probably wouldn't even know. That was the part that still amazes me. How confident he was in my absence. The summons arrived. My name on the paper. His signature at the bottom, messy and arrogant. I felt the old spike of anger, sharp and familiar. But it didn't control me. It organized me. I made a call. Then another. Then another. Uniform pressed, hair tight, documents stacked in precise order, every step deliberate. Calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's emotion under discipline. The morning of the hearing, I arrived early. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Wooden benches, echoing footsteps, people whispering as if the walls might listen. He came in late. Of course he did. New jacket. Cheap cologne trying to suffocate the smell of alcohol. that same smug confidence he wore like armor. He leaned toward his lawyer and said it loud enough for others to hear. "She's serving. She won't come. Probably mopping floors somewhere." He laughed. My mother sat alone, folded into herself, hands clasped too tightly. She didn't look up. I don't think she could bear another disappointment. Then the door opened. My boots hit the floor in steady rhythm, not rushed, not hesitant. Conversation died instantly. I felt it before I saw it. That strange, electric pause when a room realizes something important just walked in. The judge stood. Not slowly, immediately. Then everyone else followed, almost confused by their own reaction. My father's face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand trembled. The lawyer turned toward him, whispering urgently. I walked forward and stopped where I was instructed. Posture straight, eyes forward, uniform rigid like armor grown into my skin. "You?" he breathed. "Yes," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "Me." He tried to laugh, tried. It came out wrong. "You think this changes something?" "It already has," I replied. The judge looked between us, then down at the documents, then back at me. "Is the plaintiff aware?" the judge asked slowly. "That the defendant is currently active service?" Silence. My father swallowed. The judge continued, voice colder now. "And that property seizure under these circumstances is not only invalid, but potentially unlawful?" My father sank back into his chair. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in him. Real fear, not anger pretending to be power. He wanted the house. Instead, he discovered exactly who had been living inside it all along. I thought the courtroom would be the end of it. That once authority stepped in, once papers were read out loud and consequences were explained in a language he couldn't twist, he'd finally back off. Men like him often shrink when the audience changes. I was wrong. What happened next wasn't loud. It was desperate. After the hearing, he avoided me completely. Wouldn't look in my direction. Wouldn't speak unless spoken to. He left the courthouse quickly, shoulders hunched, like someone trying to outrun a version of himself that had finally caught up. My mother walked beside me, silent. Her steps were lighter than I'd ever felt them. Not confident, but no longer defeated. We thought that was victory. That night, my phone started buzzing. Relatives, neighbors, old acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years. "What's going on?" "Your father says you're threatening him." "He says the military turned you against your own family." There it was. The last weapon. Reputation. He started telling people I'd come back aggressive, that I'd changed, that I'd scared him, that the uniform had made me unstable. He framed himself as the victim with impressive speed. And I understood something important in that moment. Humiliation doesn't stop when it fails. It mutates. The next attempt came fast. 2 days later, I returned to the house to collect more documents. I didn't go alone. Lesson learned. A family friend came with me, someone he respected just enough to behave. He wasn't drunk this time. That made it worse. He sat at the table, hands folded, eyes sharp. "So," he said calmly, "you like embarrassing people now?" I didn't sit. "You embarrassed yourself," I replied. He smiled, thin, bitter. "You think people believe you?" he asked. "You think that uniform makes you a hero here?" Then he raised his voice, just enough for the neighbors to hear through the open window. "Look at her," he said, pointing at me. "She comes back acting superior, threatening her own father." The friend beside me stiffened. I felt the familiar urge. Explain, justify, defend. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. "I have recordings," I said evenly. "Threats, property claims, statements you made while drunk, messages you sent." His smile froze. "If you continue," I added, "they won't stay private." For a split second, I saw real panic flash across his face. Not rage, not contempt. fear. He hadn't expected evidence. He'd expected silence, shame, confusion. That was his mistake. He leaned back slowly, reassessing. "You wouldn't," he muttered. I met his eyes, calm, steady. "I already did," I said. "I just haven't shared everything." The room felt smaller after that. The neighbor across the street pretended not to watch from behind a curtain. The friend beside me exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. My father said nothing else. And for the first time, the humiliation changed direction. Not because I raised my voice, not because I threatened him, but because everyone present understood something he couldn't undo anymore. I wasn't afraid of exposure. He was. That night, my phone went quiet. No more calls, no more messages. Silence, finally, on my terms. And that's when I realized the worst thing you can do to someone who feeds on control is show them they no longer own the narrative. After the silence came something stranger than shouting or threats. Space. Days passed without messages. No sudden visits. No dramatic accusations leaking through relatives. The house existed in a strange vacuum, like a storm that had run out of wind but hadn't fully dissipated yet. And in that space, something inside me finally began to move. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had gone into anticipating him, his moods, his next move, his next lie. Even when I wasn't near him, my mind had been. Like a guard dog that never sleeps, always listening for footsteps. When that stopped, I didn't feel relief at first. I felt empty. That scared me more than anger ever had. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't know what to do with a quiet day. No crisis to manage, no threat to prepare for, just time. And time can be brutal when you've spent your life surviving instead of living. That's when the memories started surfacing in sharper detail. Moments I'd buried because they were inconvenient, embarrassing, too heavy. Like the first time he'd laughed at me in front of others and I'd laughed too, just to make it stop. Or the way I used to rehearse sentences in my head before speaking, calculating which version of myself would provoke the least damage. Or how I'd learned to read the sound of his footsteps to know whether to disappear. Service had trained my body to endure stress. But this was different. This was unlearning. I started therapy through a veterans support program. I didn't tell anyone at first. Part of me still believed asking for help meant weakness. That belief dies slowly. The therapist didn't ask about him right away. She asked about me. What did I like? What felt safe? What did rest feel like? I couldn't answer. That realization hit harder than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. At the same time, my mother started changing too, quietly, cautiously. She called more often, asked questions she'd never dared to ask before, about my work, about my plans, about how to say no without apologizing. One evening, she said, "He doesn't come home as much anymore." Not relief, just observation. "Good," I replied. She hesitated, then, "He's scared of you." I closed my eyes. "I don't want him scared," I said. "I want him irrelevant." That was the truth. Revenge fantasies are easy. They feel powerful, but they keep you tied to the person you're trying to escape. I didn't want to orbit him anymore, not as victim, not as opponent. I wanted gravity back. So I made another decision. I stopped reacting entirely. No updates, no explanations, no emotional responses passed through family channels. I let lawyers speak. I let documents speak. I let silence do its work. And slowly, people noticed. Not the dramatic kind of noticing, the quiet kind, the way conversations shifted, the way his version of events stopped spreading because there was nothing new to fuel it. He tried once more. A last, clumsy attempt. A message, late at night. "You think you've won?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then I deleted it. No reply. That's when it finally sank in. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't need witnesses. And it doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like building a life so solid that the people who tried to break you no longer fit anywhere inside it. And for the first time, I felt something unfamiliar but unmistakable. Peace. Fragile. Yes, but real. And once you feel that, you don't give it back. The strange thing about peace is that it attracts attention you didn't ask for. Once I stopped reacting, people started looking, not at him, at me. It wasn't dramatic. No apologies lined up at my door. No sudden confessions of guilt. It showed up in small, almost uncomfortable ways. An aunt who used to repeat his words back to me suddenly asked, "Are you okay now?" A neighbor who once avoided eye contact nodded at me differently, slower, with something like respect. A family friend quietly said, "I didn't know. I should have. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't explain. I didn't rewrite the past for their comfort. I just let their discomfort exist." That was new power. Meanwhile, his world started shrinking, not collapsing, shrinking. Which is worse for people like him. Invitations dried up, conversations shortened. People didn't argue with him anymore. They simply stopped engaging. He tried to revive the old story, but it landed flat without my reaction to prop it up. Victims who don't perform their role confuse the entire cast. The most unsettling moment came a month later. I ran into him accidentally. Public place, midday. No alcohol buffer. He looked older, smaller, not physically, energetically, like someone whose voice no longer echoed the way it used to. He froze when he saw me. I didn't. I kept walking at the same pace, heart steady, posture relaxed, not rigid, not defensive. He cleared his throat. "So, this is who you are now?" I stopped, turned, looked at him without anger, without fear, without hunger for resolution. "This is who I always was," I said. "You just couldn't control her." The words landed harder than anything shouted ever could. For a second, I saw something raw on his face. Not remorse, not regret. Loss. He'd lost the version of me that made him feel powerful. And that loss terrified him. "I did my best," he muttered like a defense offered to the air. "No," I replied calmly. "You did what was easiest." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. As I walked away, I felt something click into place, not closure, but clarity. Humiliation thrives on witnesses who believe the lie. Once the lie collapses, all that's left is a person standing alone with what they did. That's not justice in the cinematic sense. It's quieter, slower, more permanent. Later that night, my mother called. "He's moving out," she said. "For good." I closed my eyes. Not relief, not joy, just confirmation. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I slept. Deeply. And when I woke up the next morning, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by what I survived, but by what I chose next. And that terrified me a little. Because freedom comes with responsibility. And I was finally ready to carry it. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It settles in like unfamiliar furniture, useful, solid, but strange enough that you bump into it at first. After he moved out, the house felt different. Not happier, not lighter, just quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how much noise you normalized just to survive. My mother didn't celebrate either. She cleaned, rearranged cabinets, fixed things that had been broken for years and never mentioned. Survival habits don't disappear overnight. But there was a shift in her posture, subtle, almost imperceptible. She stood straighter. She spoke slower. She stopped explaining herself. I noticed that more than any words. As for me, the aftermath hit in waves. The first wave was exhaustion, not physical, emotional, the kind that makes your bones feel heavy. I slept a lot, longer than I ever had. My body finally believed it didn't need to stay alert every second. The second wave was anger, delayed and sharp. Not at him, at the world that watched and stayed quiet, at relatives who now claimed ignorance, at systems that only listened once I showed up in uniform with documents and proof. I let myself feel it, not to drown in it, but to acknowledge it. Anger ignored has a way of rotting into bitterness. The third wave was identity. Without him, without the constant opposition, who was I? Service had given me structure, purpose, clear rules, clear consequences. Civilian life didn't offer that clarity. There was no enemy to identify, no mission to complete, just choices. I went back to therapy. I started working out not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel my body move without punishment attached to it. I learned how to say no without explaining, how to sit in silence without bracing. Some days were easy, others felt hollow. But something important happened during those hollow days. I didn't reach for chaos to fill them. I didn't provoke him. I didn't seek validation. I didn't replay old conversations in my head hoping for a better ending. I let the emptiness exist, and slowly, it filled itself. With plans, with goals that weren't reactions, with people who didn't need convincing, with moments that didn't require armor. One evening, a neighbor stopped me outside the house. "You're different," she said carefully. "In a good way." I smiled, not proudly, just honestly. "Yeah," I replied. "I know." That night, I stood in the living room where so many arguments had happened and realized something quietly powerful. This space no longer held his voice. It held mine, not loud, not dominant, just present. And presence, I learned, is the one thing humiliation can never survive. I used to think the end of a story looked like justice, a verdict, an apology, a moment where everyone finally understands who was right and who was wrong. I waited for that kind of ending longer than I want to admit. It never came. What came instead was quieter and far more unsettling in a good way. Months passed, not dramatic months, ordinary ones, bills, appointments, work, mornings where nothing bad happened, evenings where I didn't replay conversations in my head before falling asleep. Life without constant threat turned out to be strangely plain, and that plainness was a gift. The man who once controlled the temperature of every room he entered faded into background noise. I heard updates through others at first, how he was having a hard time, how he didn't understand why everyone turned on him, how he missed his family. Then even those updates stopped. Not because he changed, but because he no longer mattered enough to be discussed. That was the final consequence he never anticipated. My mother began making decisions without asking permission. Small ones at first, paint colors, furniture placement, then bigger ones, finances, repairs, plans. She didn't transform overnight. She didn't suddenly become fearless, but she became present in her own life. One day she said, "I didn't know it could be this quiet." Neither did I. As for me, the biggest lesson wasn't about strength, or revenge, or proving anyone wrong. It was about dignity. Humiliation only works when you internalize it, when you let someone else define your worth long enough that their voice becomes yours. Service didn't erase my past, but it taught me something crucial. Discipline over reaction, choice over instinct, silence as power, not surrender. The people who tried to humiliate me expected fear, or rage, or collapse. What horrified them instead was composure. They weren't shocked because I fought back. They were shocked because I didn't need to. If you're reading this and you're still inside a situation like the one I came from, here's what I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't owe anyone your breaking point as proof. You don't need to explode to be believed. And you don't have to become cruel to stop being controlled. Leaving doesn't make you weak. Staying quiet doesn't make you powerless. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what no longer gets access to you. I didn't win in the way movies teach us to expect. I won by becoming someone humiliation couldn't reach anymore. And that kind of victory doesn't end with applause. It ends with peace. And peace, once earned, is not negotiable.